Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the What the Fantasy Football Show. We'll bring you host Tony Sincata back from his tour of Turkey. Of course, Mike Blewett from the Far East, and I am Jim Day. We are a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, and we're bringing it strong each and every day of the week. We have new podcasts out every day, so come out, check us out. A lot of stuff going on. And right now, I'm going to bring you the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tony Sincata.
Yeah. We're getting really close to football practice begun. I actually got the Jacksonville Jaguars sending me some emails today to sign up for some open practice and go down there and watch that. Mike, can you feel it getting a little closer now?
Like it. We actually had some big stories today in training camp, a surprise release by the Green Bay Packers, but stories are starting to bubble up. Melvin Gordon obviously is the biggest news right now, but a couple of other tidbits. Trent Williams expected to be in Washington camp soon, maybe. That's what the coach says, but I don't know if I believe him.
We'll see how that all plays out. You know, you mentioned Turkey, Jim Day. I got to go back to a story. When I was in 10th grade, I took ancient history, and you always had to write these long papers, everybody. And I truly believed my teacher didn't read the whole entire stories that people put in. So I wrote like a 2-line sentence that when Columbus went through Turkey, they threw drumsticks and wings at him. And he circled it and gave me 5 points for creativity.
Oh, there you go. Sometimes you just got to really just put it out there and see what the heck it returns. I had a psychology test in college, and I really hated the course. I really hated the professor. I really didn't want anything to do with the course. And he put out a test that all it said was why.
Why?
All I said was because, and handed it in. And he gave me a B+.
I like that. I wonder what you needed for an A.
Yeah, really.
Mike, do you have any teachers back in the day that you think didn't read all the entire essay?
Any or many? Like, clearly. My verbose butt was, I don't think they were reading all of my stuff. I probably thought I was smarter than I was and probably wrote too much, so it is what it is. But as far as your 5 bonus points, it's just like looking at a baseball box score. When you look at it a month from now, it's a hit. So it's a double down the line as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't matter that it was, trickled over the bag and dribbled into the outfield and you got to second. It's a liner in the gap.
Any way you can get it done. And speaking of getting it done, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are expected to have a good offense this year. And I'll tell you what, I go both ways on this because
we knew that.
It's not the only place you're going both ways.
Yeah, that's a different show. Now, Bruce Arians is one of these guys that's somehow called a legend. I don't know if the guy's ever won anything. I don't know if the guy's ever done anything that was great. He had a great run with the Colts as a fill-in coach, but he had some talent there. I'm not sure at the quarterback position. They got questions at the running back position, and Mike Evans is a pretty good wide receiver. All that being said, they don't even know who the starting running back is. But according to the Pewter Pot, which used to be a fine restaurant but now is a website for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that it is Peyton Barber's job to lose as the running back of the Buccaneers. How do you feel, Mike, about Peyton Barber? And secondly, how do you feel about this Buck offense under Coach Arians?
I'll take the offense first because the upside is that they are playing against the easiest passing schedule going into the season in the entire league based on last year's pass defenses. Obviously, a lot of that has changed, but you have to figure Bruce Arians could have a positive influence on Jameis in what is an absolute make-or-break career season for him. They have pretty good weapons there. Godwin and Mike Evans. In fact, recently I saw a commentary by Bruce Arians saying Godwin's not going to come off the field. He sees him as potentially being a 100-catch guy. So that has me excited about Godwin. But when it comes down to it, George Kurtz uses this line all the time, our friend for many years. How do you know when a coach is lying? When his lips are moving. So a lot of this is probably camp stories, subterfuge, and all that kind of stuff. I tend to believe this stuff about Godwin. As far as the running back position is concerned, I don't think anybody's sold on Peyton Barber, but the problem is with a new coaching staff, they don't have to be married to Ronald Jones. So the amount of draft capital that was spent on him last year may be forgotten. If there was the same coaching staff, they'd feel the need to use Ronald Jones, but him putting on 12 pounds and then becoming more successful doesn't ring true to me. So I think Ronald Jones still has a lot of wood to chop to get that starting job.
Jim, what are your thoughts? Peyton Barber, of course, everybody's dying for running backs. Arians is supposed to be the offensive god savior. All he reminds me is the drunk in the corner of the bar that every once in a while coaches a team. Kind of like the guy that used to be the Steve Spurrier, man. He's a little Steve Spurrier in him. I think he talks a good game. He has a few drinks and says, let's play a little football. And he's Jameis Winston, who I believe is one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks in the league. What's your thoughts on the Bucs offense and Peyton Barber?
I like the Bucs offense this year. I've been trying to grab pieces of it everywhere I can. Look, I'm an Arians guy. I like what he did with Arizona, what he did with Carson Palmer, especially. He knows how to get the most out of his guys. He's going to move them around. He's going to create mismatches. He's going to throw the ball down the field, which does fit into what Winston can do. Winston is very good at throwing the ball down the field. He has no problem at all chucking that ball, and that's what they're going to do in this offense. There still may be some interceptions along the way, but I'm not worried about it. If you look at this team last year, because of the lack of a defense, they have to throw a lot, and that's what they did last year. And if you add up what the two quarterbacks did, Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston last year, they were actually a number 5 quarterback. That's the kind of points they put up each and every week. Didn't matter which one it was, but when you totaled it all up, they were the number 5 quarterback.
Third in the league in yards.
Yeah, right. I think this team is going to put up a lot of points that way because their defense is still not very good. Peyton Barber, I've never been a fan of Peyton Barber. He's, 2 yards in a cloud of dust. He's always been that to me. I've never seen anything more from him. I've been a little higher on Ronald Jones just based on the early reports coming out of OTAs from some of the beat writers that I read. And, they said he looked like he was in shape. He looked like he was working hard. They were saying that he was in all the meetings and really into it and trying to pick up the offense as best he could. All the things he really didn't do last year. He came into the league last year thinking he was big, hot, whatever, and he was going to take the league by storm. And then the NFL said, yeah, sure. Welcome to the league, rookie, and beat his ass down. Maybe finally he realizes that he has to put the work in to be good in this sport. I like him better. I'd rather take the shot on him than Peyton Barber. I just can't waste a draft pick on Peyton Barber. What he did last year is probably what you're looking at is his max in any given year. And that was, 871 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, but only a 3.7 yards per carry average. So, I just can't get behind him. I'd much rather take a chance on Ronald Jones actually realizing how he can play the game and get into the game than I would with Barber.
So based on your two guys' answers, you sound like my former boss, Mike Cardano, not too excited to see the Barber because there's nothing there.
Nope.
Moving on to the Rams of Los Angeles. Cooper Kupp. No pup list. It will be a full go at Rams training camp. He's been a guy we've talked about on the show as being drafted a little later than we think. And then you got Robert Woods. You got Brandon Cooks. Jim, where do you see Cooper Kupp going, and do you see him moving up draft boards now?
I don't think he'll move up draft boards much. Right now, he's currently coming off the board as like the 22nd wide receiver, right around the same area as Godwin and Lockett. And you're right. Yeah, this offense is going to be good enough for all 3 of these guys to be very solid, if not all 3 wide receiver ones, very close to the cusp of having all 3 right at that edge. And I'm not worried about it at all. I like what he does. I like what Robert Wood does, and Brandon Cooks, does it all. So I think these guys are all in for a good season, and I'm not worried about it at all. But I don't think he's going to start vaulting up draft boards because of it.
Yeah, I'm hoping Robert Woods will actually slide down. He's the guy that I like to draft on my teams. How do you see this playing out, Mike?
That was actually where I was going to go with that, Tony, is Woods is the guy you'd most want to have of all the Rams wide receivers?
Based on where I believe they'll go, and I think, it could possibly be the third one picked, right? Now that Cooper Kupp is healthy consistently, and I'll take the third one.
So I agree with that sentiment completely. On the ADPs we're working off of, it's sort of a high-stakes ADPs. Right now, it's Cooks at 16, Woods at 19, Kupp at 22. I think in general, that makes a lot of sense. Although, given this news, I expect Woods and Kupp to flip-flop, in which case I agree with what you're saying. Personally, I would have no reservations taking Kupp because I do think that is Goff's security blanket. I feel like he has a lot of comfort in throwing to him. Now, McVay does a really good job of scheming everybody open, but I don't mind having Kupp on there. There's just the obvious note that the other two are going to have more explosive plays, particularly Cooks. So I don't have a problem having any of the three, but I'm definitely leaning more towards Kupp and even Woods as we move forward through draft season.
I think the numbers are distorted when you go back and look at last year's numbers on passing attempts by the Rams because of the success they had offensively. I think after the Super Bowl, everybody copycats. You'll see them not as great offensively as they were last year.
I think they could take a step back. I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm not buying that. I think McVay is smart enough and innovative enough to take what he learned from the end of last season and turn that around and be able to use that to actually make the offense more effective this year so that you don't see that kind of breakdown.
They had the second best offense in the NFL last year. Some might argue it was the best, and they were missing Cooper Kupp. So I do find Kupp to be such an important cog in that offense. I understand he doesn't have the explosive plays, but the more I talk through this, I think Kupp might be the guy I'd want. But I understand Tony's sentiment about Woods just being the latest one to pick, so why not just take that value?
Yeah. And
Woods has been their leading receiver the last 2 years in a row.
Yeah, he just doesn't have the name recognition as the other two guys. Here's where I think that we might get more from Jared Goff and some of these wide receivers than we have the last couple of years. Everybody talks about limiting Todd Gurley, and they always talking about the next running back that's going to come in. I think as Jared Goff progresses as a professional, we start to see more passing attempts. That was the one thing that bothered me about drafting Goff, even if you had him in 2 quarterback leagues, is some games he just didn't get enough passing attempts.
There's no doubt when Gurley's having one of those games where he's putting up 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, there's sometimes just not a lot for Goff to do.
Yeah, particularly early in the year, Tony, they were throttling down the number of attempts he had. But I think they're still building trust with the coaching staff. There's been a lot of talk about his long-term possibilities in LA. You wouldn't think that they would move on from a quarterback that's having the success that he had, but I think there's still an element that they're not entirely sold that he is the long-term fix or the long-term solution at quarterback. I hear a lot of stories like that intimate that maybe they won't extend him at $25 million a year or $30 million a year.
I think that would be a mistake.
I do too. I'll tell you what, the quarterback position is so hard. It can set your team back so far. After the first year,
get it wrong, yeah.
Yeah, after the first year when this kid couldn't even call the plays in the huddle, and people were shaking their head and see the improvement of where he's come this far, you can't give up on this guy now.
Yeah, but don't you think it's McVay's influence that has really helped him progress as much?
Oh,
now,
absolutely. But
you could argue it both ways. Why get rid of him now that he's progressed so much? But maybe there's a thought that a more talented quarterback could blow the doors off the league like Mahomes did last year.
How often do we see a quarterback like Mahomes come out? And it's not like Goff, like you said, it wasn't like Goff who was putting up garbage numbers. I think that would be a mistake.
He didn't have a 40 passing attempt game until that Rams game, until that Saints game, Tony, and that was the 9th game of the year for him. And that's when Kupp got hurt. That was the irony of it. They really had a whole bunch of games while Kupp was out where he was throwing the ball 40, 49, 44, 53 times as it got towards the end of the season. And, Gurley started to slow down a little bit too. So it's interesting. I don't know that the offense takes that much of a step back, but I think the team could. I think the Super Bowl hangover could be real for them. Doesn't mean that they missed the playoffs. I just don't know that they're going to get back to the promised land again. I wouldn't pick them to.
Just one last thing on Goff. It just seems weird, but it's hard to think that the fact that he's still only 24.
I think that's a great point.
He's really he could still get much better. So again, I can't. If
Carson Wentz is older than him.
I think,
by like a year and a half.
I think it'd be a serious mistake.
Oh, I think so too. I just watched the quarterback play, and we know about the 7 or 8 quarterbacks that are over 37 years of age, and to see the young quarterbacks that have come into this league is going to be quarterback starved possibly in 3 or 4 years. And to let a guy go with promise, I think would be a huge mistake.
You guys like him more than Wentz long term?
This is the funniest thing. I have a team that I drafted Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, and I hated having both those guys.
Why?
And the reason I hate it is because I think 1 week to the next I'll be changing my mind on who should be playing quarterback.
And that's the problem.
Tough.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Look, we know Wentz can be great in this league. We've seen him do it when he's on the field. But if you look at the contract he just signed, the big contract he just signed, the team has it weighted in such a way where they're only paying him like $750,000 this year, and they have an option to buy it out at the end of the season if he ends up missing a lot of time due to injury again. Yeah. So they protected themselves in this big contract. Yeah, and that's it. But that's the concern. You know, even the team is showing that they have concern that he can stay healthy. And if I was going to grab Carson Wentz, I would absolutely make sure I come back right away and get another good quarterback.
Yeah, the Rams breakdown. For all the people following on our list here, we're going to move down to number 8 because number 8 and 3 go together. And that is the San Diego Los Angeles Chargers this season have a running back that could be holding out. And I'll tell you what, I was the guy last year that said, there's no way Le'Veon Bell's going to hold out a whole year. What's he do, make Slurpees? And he never made Slurpees, but he never showed up to work. And I got to ask Mike, when you go into a draft, do you think there's any way Melvin Gordon could miss this whole season?
Not the whole season. I did a whole bunch of digging today as to what he needs to do in order to accrue another season of service. And it seems that he's going to have to play at least 6 games. Possibly 8. There's a bunch of precedents set by Joey Galloway in the past. So I think Gordon, let's just say they don't come to an agreement this summer. And I don't think he's going to be conceded much, if anything. You made the point before the show that the Chargers are not a great team to negotiate with. So I think he does have to be in there for a certain amount of time. Maybe it's just 6 games, sort of like that deadline that Le'Veon had last year. Now, Gordon's under contract. Le'Veon's not. They can fine him up to $1.5 million. So I don't think he misses the whole year. It would put him in a situation where the 50-year option that he is playing under right now, if he holds out the whole year, it just tolls to another year, and he'd have to play under the 50-year option next year. So he'd be in the exact same position, I believe, contractually, if he held out the whole year here, other than an outright release, which the Chargers wouldn't do.
There still is confusion about that week 10 or not, because I see one guy saying he doesn't have to worry about it. If he sits out the whole season, he still has enough time accrued to be
I don't think that's true, but you're right. There's confusion.
Yeah, right. And that's what I'm saying. We had the same thing with Bell. Last year, it was assumed that he had to come in by week 10 to get the season accrued. And then just before week 10, we found out that wasn't the case.
Because his agent didn't know that was true.
And you're right. But neither did anybody else. And that's the problem with most of this stuff. These things are so buried in legalese that it's so hard to figure out. You have to be an expert.
Is 316 pages long if anybody wants a little light summer reading.
That's nothing for me. I read novels that are over 1,200 pages, but I still wouldn't read that damn thing. It's just a totally bad situation. But the two differences that Mike alluded to is that Gordon is under contract, Bell wasn't. So Gordon definitely could lose a lot of money, not just his pay, but the fines that they can give him. And if he does indeed have to show up by week 10, then it's a different story. Then he has to at least play those last 6 games. But I don't think he does it. I think he's trying his best to do it now. But given the history of the Chargers and how they deal with this kind of stuff, I think somebody eventually has got to say, okay, dude, you tried your best. It ain't happening. Get in the camp.
So, Jim, when you draft today, if you drafted tonight, do you slot Melvin Gordon down a little lower because of this situation, or are you just ignoring it?
No, I would push him into the second round at this point. But then, to be totally honest, I mean, there's not too often I find myself with the desire to draft him anyway. Nothing against him. He had a great year last year. Finally broke that tendency to go over 4 yards a carry, which was nice. But the problem for me is there's always seems to be other running backs around him that I trust and like a little bit more. So I don't really tend to pull the trigger on him. If I were to pull the trigger on him now, it wouldn't be until a few picks into round 2.
Tony, here's my approach. I'm out on Gordon until I hear that he's coming to camp. It really increases my personal approach towards Eckler.
Yep.
And
see, I disagree with that.
And I will probably not get in on Justin Jackson because he will be drafted too high. He can create a lot of value when he plays the games that he's playing, but I think people now overdraft Justin Jackson because I do expect Gordon to come back at some point. So Eckler, his value increases for me over the course of the year because I know he's going to be there in a prominent role, whether Gordon comes in or he doesn't, or he plays half the season or doesn't. So that's why Eckler's value increases for me.
Jim, you disagree on Austin Eckler. You don't seem
well,
to be
no. The way Mike phrased it at the end, I get what he's saying there. You know, Eckler's going to have his role no matter what, is what Mike's saying. Whereas Justin Jackson needs Gordon not to be there to get a big role, to be able to do anything. I don't know if Justin Jackson is flying up draft boards, though. A lot of people are like you and are leaning towards Eckler. So I haven't really seen Justin Jackson flying up draft boards.
It's very interesting because this week, NFL.com, Mike Silver reports Chargers coach Anthony Lynn expects big things from Justin Jackson. First off, when I read it the first time, I said, of course the coach is going to say this because he's trying to get Melvin Gordon into camp, right? So can you throw this out of the window, or is there any chance in either of your mind that Justin Jackson could outplay Austin Eckler for that number 2 role?
No, see, 2 totally different roles. Justin Jackson will be the early down and goal line back if Gordon is gone. Eckler is going to be the change of pace back. He catches passes, does a little bit of everything. They use him inside the 5-yard line as well.
That's the key for me.
Right,
for
so
he gets a huge red zone market share.
Yeah, right. So he's going to have his role defined no matter what happens to Gordon. It's only Justin Jackson that really sees an increase in his value if Gordon is out.
By the way you just put it, though, if Justin Jackson is not getting the ball at the goal line and not catching passes, even if he plays, his value is going to be limited.
No, I'm not saying he's not going to get all the goal line touches. All I'm saying is Eckler gets enough to make him viable that way. It's not his main duty, but they use it a lot to create mismatches. They send the main back to one side, and they send Eckler the other way.
Mike, your last final thoughts on the San Diego backfield?
I'd almost just throw a conversation piece out there. If you're the Chargers, do you feel like you have to have Gordon in here to try to win the Super Bowl, A? And then B, would you even worry about extending him long-term because you have these other 2 backs that are capable there?
I think in most cases, the running back in today's football is an overrated position. And I think we pay attention because it's fantasy. But I think if you have a strong line and you have a capable running back, you can make things happen. In the way that you use the passing game, too, with the running backs now, you can use 2 or 3 running backs. You don't need that great running back.
Yep.
But that being said, you point out the Chargers have a great defense. They have an aging quarterback. They have a wide receiver, Keenan Allen, that if he can stay on the field, he's as good as anyone. You would think they'd have to go hard, but the San Diego Chargers ownership have never made the best decisions in 30 years of following football.
Yeah, Rosalo Kung is now hurt, too. They're expecting him to miss most of training camp, so that's another shot to the offensive line. They only really drafted 1 guy in the mid-rounds this year, and Hunter Henry's coming back. Look, I think their roster top to bottom is as good as any in the league, and they have to be focused on winning the Super Bowl this year because these windows aren't open for that long, particularly when you have a 37, 38-year-old quarterback. So I would suggest that they need Gordon to win the Super Bowl, but I think they can compete really heavily without him, and I don't think they're going to extend him based on the fact that they have capable players behind him. And I think Melvin Gordon might be in a situation that Le'Veon Bell was in this past year where ultimately he's just a free agent. They don't tag him and let him move on.
They have it. The San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers. They played a 29,000-seat stadium last year. Is that happening again?
Yeah.
What the heck? Why are they playing
the Rams stadium isn't ready yet.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's the biggest stadiums. I mean, Walmart's parking lot can probably fit 30,000.
It's probably perfect for them. They don't have a fan base. I mean, they're filling this stadium because people from other cities are showing up to watch their teams play.
What a disaster. The NFL, the all-powerful, and we got a team in L.A. that nobody wants to claim, the Chargers. And they have one of the craziest ownerships in the world. The Green Bay Packers have a new head coach that reminds people of a dictator, and he's trying to sow his oats. And Aaron Rodgers can change plays at the huddle. He could change them at the line. He could change them, I guess, at night when he's filming commercials. But who are going to be the receivers? Geronimo Allison will be one. Allison only played 11% of his plays last year in the slot. And this year he says that is where he wants to play, and that's where he's focusing on. Jim, is this the best move for Allison?
Rodgers loves to throw to his slot position, and I think we're going to see Allison really come up big this year. Look, I think both him and Marquez Valdes-Scantling are both going to have good years if this offense is any bit different than it was last year, not as pedestrian. You know, that's what the talk is all about. The problem is, part of that talk is the coach wants to run play-action passes, and Rodgers doesn't like play-action passes because it causes him to turn his back to the defense, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't want to have his back to the defense at all. So you got a few of these little pissing matches going on between him and the head coach right from the get-go. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out, but it's not like the head coach has any leverage when you're talking about a guy like Aaron Rodgers.
Especially when he guided the Titans passing offense last year, which was 29th in the league. So I had I thought Matt LaFleur was a great addition to the Titans last year and expected big things, obviously, and it just didn't happen. Mariota might have been hurt, but it was the 29th passing offense. They obviously weren't dynamic. They didn't get Corey Davis the ball as much as they should have. They had a tight end go down. They had a bunch of stuff go wrong. But still, this has got to improve in a hurry. I think it's probably a good thing statistically for Geronimo Allison, but it isn't really necessarily a career lengthening move. He's been banged up. He could take some shots in the slot that he might not be accustomed to. So from that standpoint, it's risky. But with the ball in his hands more, Tony, he'll just have an opportunity to pick up more first downs, rack up stats, and potentially get a contract extension either in Green Bay or somewhere else.
You just mentioned two guys that are on more than 50% of my teams, Valdes-Scantling and Corey Davis. Somehow they end up on over 50% of my rosters thus far.
Why do you think that? Why do you think so?
I think, well, at Green Bay, you're going to have an opportunity. They're going to throw the ball as they got Aaron Rodgers there, and he's going in double-digit rounds. Yeah. I mean, if you got a chance to start at wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers, how are you going in double-digit rounds?
Yeah, I'm with you. Valdes-Scantling in this, even in the high-stakes leagues, he's the 45th wide receiver off the board. That's a pretty damn good value. He's almost your fifth wide receiver on some teams.
What's your thoughts, Jim, on Valdes-Scantling?
Yeah, I like them both. Really, if I don't get one, I'm usually coming back and trying to make sure I get the other, because just for that reason, you want these guys that are with these great quarterbacks to be on the field. Those are the guys you want to have. I'd much rather have a guy playing with Aaron Rodgers than playing with Lamar Jackson.
What about Equanimeous St. Brown and Jamon Moore? Those guys were drafted on either side of Valdes-Scantling last year. Granted, they didn't show anything last year, but it's not like Valdes-Scantling blew the roof off the league. He was just there because guys started dropping like flies. I just wonder if there's an opportunity for those second-year receivers to have a role as well.
I did just read a note about Jamon Moore today in that he's already had a bad OTAs. Awesome. He had a bad time in OTAs with drops, things like that, which is the same thing that was said of him last year. So it's obviously he's having some kind of issue with his concentration, or he's just got really bad hands. I don't think he's going to make much of a dent. St. Brown, there's a lot of people in that organization that like him. It's just a matter of when is he going to get in the game? Are you going to take any one of these other guys out to put him in? And right now, I don't really think they do that enough to make him viable as a fantasy option.
Here, listen to WTF Fantasy with Jim Day and, of course, Mike Blewett. And we talk football. We give you stories on life, and I don't know which one this one is. Todd Gurley is going to report at 218 pounds, which is 6 pounds less than his usual weight. This does not seem like a big story to me. It seems like a guy that's having 2 less number 2s at McDonald's on his way to practice here. Mike, should we get excited about the 6-pound weight loss for Todd Gurley?
If he chugs like 2 big glasses of water, he'd put the 6 pounds back on. It's a water weight thing. When you're talking about a 224-pound, finely tuned athlete, like if he didn't have water for a few hours, he could lose the 6 pounds of water weight. Ultimately, it's harder to keep weight on during the season. So if he stays a little bit lighter during the year, so be it. I can't imagine that 224 versus 218 has a massive impact on what could be an arthritic knee. And I know Jim is not sold on that, but it's obviously the thing that people are concerned about.
Jim, he's got less stress on his knee with that 6-pound weight loss?
Well, actually it is. I mean, it's not a huge difference, but it's a difference. And take a little bit extra, that body weight off those knees. It's got to help. Anything he does at this point without taking away from what he does on the field is probably a good thing. Just for his knee alone, taking off that little bit of weight could actually be a help.
There you have it, Todd Gurley, ready to go in the second round for all you people out there. I'll tell you the truth. When I get to the second and third round, late in the second round, early third round, this is what I do, is that I look at the players that I think are the next 4 or 5 guys, and I say, if everything goes right, which guy can bring me top 5 player value? And that's how I pick. And every time I get to that point, it tells me Todd Gurley.
I noticed he's on our team that we share together in the Best Ball League that we just completed with Jim a couple of weeks ago. So I can't argue with it. He's still an extremely dynamic running back. What happened at the end of last year was very concerning, but he's had an entire offseason in order to get this right. So until I hear that he's going to miss games or they're really going to pull back on the number of carries that he has, I just think they're going to use every last bit of Todd Gurley. I just think they will. Maybe he's not over 20 touches every game, but he's going to be in the 17 to 18 range, which is sort of where he was last year for a lot of the year.
Well, actually, only 5 games. He had only 5 games that he was under 20 touches. They were all
towards the end of the year.
Yeah, it was all at the end of the year. Last 5 out of the last 8 games. But even during that 8-game stretch, when he had 5 games of under 20 touches, he still averaged over 26 fantasy points a game in PPR, and he was still the number 2 scoring running back over that period. So, again, we don't have any problem taking Kamara, who does great with that limited number of touches that he gets. I don't understand why everybody's just bailing on Todd Gurley. Well, I guess I understand a little bit because they're worried about the knee, but, man, you're talking about an NFL running back. Anybody's knee could go in any play.
The approach to fading injured players is one that's going to win over time, but there's no evidence at this moment that he's still very injured in any way. I'd have to see more, right? I'd have to hear more. The rumblings, Tony, can't sell me on every player. There's rumblings about a lot of guys.
Coach speak. It's rampant this time of year. You got to try and dig through it and figure out what's real, what's not. Is he a risk? Absolutely. But anybody around him, any of the running backs around him where he's going now are all risks.
I agree.
They all have injury risk, or Damian Williams, can he do it over the full season? We don't know.
Cook, yep.
You got to take a chance on somebody somewhere. I'm going to take the chance on the guy who's been one of the top freaking running backs in the league the last few years, and I still think he can get it done this year.
I can't argue against that.
Speaking in coach speak, the Detroit Lions are rumored to have Theo Riddick on the bubble because they believe Kerryon Johnson can catch 60 balls. I just told you, I think the running back position is overrated in today's football. Can catch balls, and Theo Riddick's actually made a career out of it. Now, Kerryon Johnson's a big type of running back, but we do have big running backs that catch the ball in the National Football League. And I'll tell you right now, as good as people like Kerryon Johnson, he might be underrated if he's going to catch 60 balls, Jim.
I think he is actually being underrated. I think he has every chance to catch 60 balls in this offense. I don't know why or for what reason that he got the moniker that he wasn't really a pass catching back, because he can. He did it in college. He did decent last year. Had a couple of decent games receiving. I think he had one game against the Seahawks where he had, I want to say, like 6 catches for 69 yards in that game. He didn't really get much on the ground in that game, but did it through the air. So I think he has that chance. I think he's got a great coach coming in now that wants to run the ball a ton. And I think as long as he can stay on the field and stay healthy, again, it's just something we got to worry about with running backs. But if he stays on the field and stays healthy, I love him this year. I think he's definitely being undervalued. This is a guy that I think I want to say 8 out of the 10 games he played last year, he was in double-digit scoring.
Mike, your thoughts on Kerryon Johnson and now his pass-catching role in the Lions' backfield?
So Jim made a point about people giving him this moniker of being a one-dimensional back. People said the same thing about Zeke Elliott when he was first in the league. Well, he's a good running back, and they're behind a good line, but he doesn't really catch passes. All right, they started throwing the ball, and Zeke Elliott has 50 catches per season. So I think you could see the same thing here from Johnson. I've been on the bandwagon here for Kerryon Johnson, not necessarily because I think he's uber talented, but I do think that this is going to be the way that Matt Patricia is going to want to run this team. I think he's going to go old school. He's going to try to improve this defense. He brought in some of his own guys, including Trey Flowers this offseason. And I think Johnson is just going to have a real opportunity for a lot of touches, Tony. He's the last pick in the third round in drafts right now, right in that area. And when you look at some of the other guys, Aaron Jones, Devontae Freeman, Derrick Henry, Marlon Mack, Kerryon Johnson, I do think there's an opportunity for Johnson to outtouch all of them. I think you could argue Jones would be right there. But I think he does become a two-dimensional back on a team that is trying to – I think Matt Stafford's going to hate it. I really do. And I don't think they're going to win a lot of games. But I think Johnson is going to touch the ball a ton.
See, now, Tony, you were mentioning Riddick and, why take him out when he's made a living at being a pass-catching back. But that comes into the strategy of it. When you put in Riddick, everybody pretty much assumes it's going to be a passing down. When you keep Kerryon Johnson in there on third down, though, you still have that mystique of knowing you could still run the ball. You don't have to pass. So, having that back that can do both is always better on the field than not.
Plus, we're seeing more and more play calling, Tony, that has running backs catching the ball on first down. So you need to make your workhorse back more versatile.
Right, but the only negative, Jim's right and Mike's right, but the only negative is that we're trying to limit the touches on running backs now. And if we're going to leave him in 3 down backs, as we have 10% of the league now with one back in the backfield because of the durability issues at the running back position.
Yeah, but, we're seeing these teams don't want to pay this next big contract for these guys when they come out of their rookie contracts anyway. And if that's the mentality they have going in, knowing they want to run heavy and do all of that stuff, maybe they've already realized that, once they get past his rookie contract, they may not want to really re-sign him.
That's the He's case. A second-round draft pick. He doesn't have a fifth-year kicker. He just finished his rookie season. They're looking at it. We've got 900 touches out of this guy in the next 3 years. And then we'll figure it out.
Unfortunately, I think you might have hit it. I think you might have hit it on the head. And we're going to have economic decisions at the running back position. I mean, hell, we're seeing it more and more with the higher-priced guys. But the truth is these rookies, the NFL owners are getting a bargain if you can run them into the ground for 4 or 5 years, depending on when they were drafted. Then bang, get the most, and then let them go and get that next second or third round back in there.
Right. The whole fantasy community is saying running backs don't matter. So why wouldn't the coaches just catch on and say, look, Kerryon Johnson, thanks for the 4 years of service, but we're not going to pay you $9 million a year. We'll see you later. We need a pass rusher. I need that money somewhere else. I need to pay Trey Flowers. I'm going to pay you. I'm paying you on a rookie deal. I need to pay Trey Flowers
or Robbie Gould.
$15 million.
We got to pay Robbie Gould.
Robbie Gould. He scored. Robbie Gould with a massive contract. How about that? $19 million.
Yeah, really. That was pretty huge for a kicker. Damn.
And he was telling him, get me out of here. I want to trade it. I was like, when does a kicker have leverage? He's like, I want to go back home. I want to be close to Chicago. Yeah. And they don't have a kicker. And San Francisco's like, well, you're tagged, so you're not going anywhere. He's like, well, I'm not signing it. And boom, it worked. Yeah. $19 million. I can't believe it.
The Athletics, Matt Barrow says Tevin Coleman expects to be the lead back of the 49ers. I'll tell you what, I'm trying to get Tevin Coleman in drafts.
Yeah, you are.
But it depends on which draft you're in. He can go in the 6th round. He can go in the 10th round, depending on when you're drafted. Jim, what's your thoughts on the 49ers backfield and Tevin Coleman? I know it is crowded there, but every time this kid got a chance to play in Atlanta, he came up big. Now he goes back to the old coach.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say he came up big. He had his chance last year. He didn't come up big.
Oh, he lost his coach. He's now back with every time Mr. Shanahan was back there with him, he came up big.
And I understand that. And Shanahan loves to throw to those running backs and get them involved in the passing game. But he's got another good receiving running back there in Jerick McKinnon.
Possibly
they paid a lot of money to last year to come in and take that role. Look, I agree. I think Tevin Coleman is going to be the best of the three when it comes to fantasy. But I just think I'd much rather wait and take McKinnon quite a few rounds later than where Coleman is going now, just for the what-if factor. I think it comes down to whoever gets hot, that's the guy they're going to run with. And, ultimately, I don't want to pay a big dollar amount in these kind of backfields like this. And, New England falls into that. Philadelphia falls into that. These guys are going to use some form of committee. So it's really hard to commit early draft capital to these teams.
What's your thoughts, Mike, when you
The
look at
good thing
49ers?
is, the good thing is he's not particularly expensive, even on the high end right now.
Right.
He's going in the latter 6th round. I always try to hit the reset button on players, but he stung me pretty hard last year. I had him everywhere because I didn't think Freeman was going to last, and I thought he was going to be in a perfect situation, and he really wasn't that good. Now, you can buy in on the Shanahan offense, and I would too. Breida is at a great value right now, so he's a guy I'm always looking to take later in drafts because he's going 13th round or so. What I am having a difficult time is figuring out exactly what McKinnon's role is going to be. They did pay him a lot of money, but to slot him in as only a pass-catching back doesn't really make sense to me. Then again, the Niners had so much money under the cap, they spent it like monopoly money. It didn't even really matter that they gave McKinnon a $40 million deal and he got hurt. They bring Coleman in on a really advantageous deal to the team, and what does it all matter? The money's all put together. They're just going to go with the best back. I still think that's Coleman. As explosive as McKinnon is, I still have to give Coleman another shot. I just think that Breida is the best value of the three of them.
The problem that with Breida now is that there's a couple of beat writers that are saying there's a good chance he could be a healthy scratch in some games just for the fact that he doesn't do much on special teams as well. And, they're going to keep the fullback in Jurczyk. He does a great job for them, so he's always going to be there. They may not have enough spots to have all of these guys active every Sunday, and that scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, that's true.
The man who runs the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2-time Super Bowl champion Tom Coughlin, an old school coach. He says, hey, if you're on time, you're 5 minutes early for a meeting. First day of practice, his cornerback shows up in an armored truck, has an announcer with a bullhorn, and brings 12 of his family members so no one doesn't show up so he can have some people applaud him as he gets out of an armored vehicle. And, of course, he wanted a new contract from the Jaguars 2 years before his contract expires, and this is the first day of Tom Coughlin's season. Jim, what the hell is going on?
You know what? He's trying to make a point. The money's got to come, but it's not going to come. Like you said, he's still got 2 years on his contract. They don't feel the need that they have to re-up him now. They're going to wait until next year, I believe, to even approach that subject. Look, let's face it, we know how good he can be, but there were times last year he wasn't that good. There were times where he was just getting beat in games that we hadn't seen him get beat like that before.
They quit. The defense quit.
Well, and you're right. They did
against
quit.
the Titans. I mean, certainly they quit against the Titans. There are other games too. But whoever is advising Jalen Ramsey that he thinks he's going to get his rookie deal ripped up is not giving him good advice. They don't do it. They're not going to rip up your rookie deal in order to extend you at a position where it costs a lot. Now, the Rams renegotiated with Gurley to sort of smooth out the last years of the deal. It's looking like a mistake at the moment, but I still appreciated the way they smoothed out the money. So they were never really going to make Gurley the highest paid back long term. Now with Ramsey, look, he's obviously trying to make a point, but I don't think they're never going to rip up a rookie deal. And I think if you've ever seen that GIF of the dumpster on fire floating down the river, I think you're seeing the start of the Jacksonville Jaguars 2019 season.
Oh, yeah. This is crazy.
They have him basically tied up for 3 years. They have 2 years left on the contract, and then they can tag him for the third year without even having to worry about doing a new contract. So at this point, he's got no leverage whatsoever. I don't care how many armored cars he pulls up in.
Speaking about off the field issues, Jason Garrett often talked about, of course, the Cowboys. It comes out this week is the number one valued franchise in all of sports at $5 billion. Is Jason Garrett going to be the coach of the Cowboys if they miss the playoffs? This is a guy that seems to be on the fringe every year being fired, but I don't know, Jim. He keeps his job every year.
He's got to have really bad pictures of Jerry Jones doing something that he doesn't want getting out there, because you're right. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying he's a bad coach, but this team hasn't really done anything significant in quite a long time under his tenure. And you just don't see too many coaches getting that kind of leeway, especially when you work for somebody like Jerry Jones. So he's got to have something on him.
Mike, is this it for Jason Garrett? I got to be honest, Mike. I don't think he coaches anything anymore. He used to call the plays. He had that taken away from him. He had an offensive running game coach. They had an offensive passing game coach. Yeah. I don't know what the hell he does.
He's the clapper. He's the he claps it up. He's super positive in every interview, and I never understand why he's so positive. But look, good season last year. If they missed the playoffs, I think that's finally time for them to move. In fact, George Kurtz and I were talking about it recently. He's a big Cowboys fan. He thinks Garrett really has to make a run here, win a playoff game or two to keep his job. I know Jerry likes the role that Garrett plays because he's a little bit of a sycophant, and he just is not really going to challenge Jerry in any way. But I do think that Garrett will definitely have to make the playoffs, or they will finally make a move.
I can't believe Mike called him a sicko. That wasn't nice, Mike. You called him a sicko.
Sycophant.
Well, here's the thing. This is a whole different subject, but Mike's a Steelers fan. I just called Jason Garrett out for not coaching. Mike Tomlin will be the coach no matter what happens because Pittsburgh stays with their coach. But I wonder what the hell he does. If he drinks a little, comes to practice, makes sure everything's all right, brings the footballs, and then leaves. Because I don't understand how an NFL could be the head coach and not wear a headset.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I can appreciate the job that he does for the most part managing the team, but clearly that didn't work last year. I think the players coach thing, some players took it too far. And I do think as much as the Steelers ride the wave and they just keep guys long term for stability's sake, I think Mike Tomlin's seat is finally hot because we're at the end of Ben's career here, and they've had a team or two that should have done more than they've done. The Steelers' playoff wins since they were in the Super Bowl against Aaron Rodgers are not impressive. They lost to Jacksonville in a game where they were favored. Their wins are against guys like Matt Moore, Alex Smith, and there's one other one. He does not have a lot of playoff wins at this point, and they're against teams that he should have beaten.
I don't understand it, Jim. If you don't have the headset on, your offensive coordinator's calling plays, you got the defense coordinator calling plays. What the hell are you doing?
Well, it's hard because you don't really want to have the headset on when they throw the Gatorade on you, but
fear of electrocution.
I mean,
you're grounded. It's going to be a problem if you get electrocuted. If you're touching the defensive coordinator when that happens and you got two coaches down.
I have a problem with the Rams coach, but at least he's coaching when he goes over and the defense is on the field and he sits down next to Jared Goff and is sitting there writing plays together like they're hatching like a attached football game in the backyard, and they don't even know about the defense, that there's a defense out there. I get on about that, but I sit there and think that Jason Garrett and Mike Tomlin don't even have a headset on sometime, and I'm like, what the hell are they doing?
Tomlin needs a headset on for somebody to tell him when to challenge calls because he's absolutely horrendous at it.
It's just a crazy thing. It's gotten so convoluted with coaching now that there's so many sub-coaches and things like that. I mean, if you went to any of the old-time coaches and told them that they could have 16 assistants, they'd probably laugh at you.
Don't forget, folks, I'm going to remind you of something that's going to be brutal this NFL season you probably don't even want to think about. But we are going to have instant replays on pass interference calls, and I can't wait.
Yeah,
I can't wait for that to happen.
Oh, man.
Good times.
That is going to be crazy. And I don't, they keep saying, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. But, it's not going to be like that.
I do give them credit. The catch designations were a massive improvement last year from the prior year. I have to give them credit. At least in one regard. It's not perfect, but it was certainly better and improved from 2017. It was better,
but Mike, you're just giving them credit for allowing the fans to actually know what a catch is. Like, it should have never got to that point.
Oh, I agree with that. I agree. 2017 was a disaster. I watched the Steelers lose a game to the Patriots because a blade of grass moved after the guy fell into the end zone. It was insane. We didn't know what was going to happen in the Super Bowl. There were plays where we didn't know what was going to happen.
It was insane. That's it for WTF Fantasy. Mike, we got a lot of good things going on. A lot of great stuff happening for everybody to get their information. You got podcasts, you got draft guides, you got leagues going on. What the hell's going on, Jim Day?
Oh, everything. Just everything you just mentioned. Over at ffchamps.com, our draft kit is live. We're adding to it every day. All our great tools, our draft tracker tool, our customizable cheat sheets, all that great stuff. Our player index will come out week 1. All those great tools that have been running that site for years now. And then, of course, the podcast network. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we have 18 podcasts, over 35 hours a week of podcasting goodness now going on. It's a ton of stuff. And, of course, every Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock, you can come join us on the Fantasy Football Frenzy on the FNTSY Sports Network. So come on out and listen and watch, folks.
Hey, Mike, what's going on in your life?
Fantasy Sports Radio Network on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday mornings. It's Weekend Fantasy Update. And then during the weeknights, you'll hear me on occasion, including tomorrow night, Thursday night, the 25th. I will be on a live show in the evenings talking about wagers and live betting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I've had a piece since 9:38. If you're listening to this podcast, 10:01. Yeah. I'm working out for that Tim Tebow show or whatever he does now. There.
He's on the IL.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's in the minor league IL.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And Tebow, of course, he's another guy. He's a guy like you think Tim Tebow. I used to praise this guy and think he was the greatest person in the world, and he's still pretty good. But the one thing that bothers me about Tebow is that like he takes the weekends off from his minor league team to go broadcast for the SEC network. Yeah. You're on a team. You stay and you play the game. Make up a decision. You're this all about it guy, and you want everybody to do well, and you do a lot of great things, but that's wrong.
I think he pretty much laid down his cards. He pretty much laid down his cards. It's like, look, we all know minor league baseball isn't important. That's basically what Tebow said. This doesn't really matter. We're not in the big leagues, so I'm just going to check out this TV check.
Actually, it sounds more to me like he realizes he will never get into the big leagues, so why care?
Well, it's the Mets, so.
Yeah, well, there is that, but that's why I think he would have a better shot, because it is the Mets.
I'm sad. You can imagine if Rudy ended up like this, and Rudy, on the weekends.
he went back and worked at his father's bar, right?
He went on weekends. He played in a video game league, and
the show is $1 Million Mile. By the way, Tony, it's LeBron James produced. My son, who's 6, thinks it's awesome. I'm not sure I share his opinion.
Well, I'll be ready for when holding P. I'm going to get on that episode. WTF Fantasy, Mike Blewett, Jim Day. We'll be out of here. See you next Wednesday. Drafts are coming. Drafts are furious. Keep drafting and get all the information you need from Jim Day, Mike Blewett. Check them out on Twitter because Jim has a lot of followers. Mike needs more followers, Mike.
I do.
So follow Mike, and every once in a while, he'll put some tasty nugget out there.
I will. I promise.
And
good night, all.
Good night, all.